Guys, welcome back to NASA's Thread. So, we're learning how to make this skirts with side extension and fringe, right? Let's begin if it's something you're interested in learning how to make. So, I have the materials I'll be needing for this. I'll be showing you what I have. So, this is my black fabric, which is going to serve as my main skirt. Actually, a scuba fabric, but you can use any other black fabric you have. Okay, you can see it stretches at one side more than the other side. So I have about half 1.5 yard, sorry, 1 yard of this that I'll be using for this skirt. You can see how this is. All right, it's going to be enough for what I want it for. I have this little piece of fabric that I have remaining from one of my projects that I'll be using for my extension, and I have about 4 yards of fringe. Okay, so depending on how much fringe you want, the length of fringe you want, just get go ahead and get it for yourself. So I also have my other sewing materials and a zipper I'll be using for this project. So I've gone ahead to fold my fabric into four. Now it's a skirt, so it means one part will have zip allowance. So go ahead and fold yours like so. So I'm just taking the measurement to ensure I have enough. All right. You just need to use the hip circumference because that is the biggest part of the body. Use that to check if you have enough so that you can take out where there's excess and then have. Okay, this is because my fabric isn't much, so if you have more fabric, okay, you still need to do the same thing. So I'm taking my measurement. The first thing I'm taking is my hip point and then the full length of the skirt I want. Okay, so there'll be a band sitting at the top of this. The band will be about 2 inches. Okay, so I'm going to minus the 2 inches I'll be using for my band from the full length of my skirt, and I'll go ahead to measure the length I want for my skirt. Okay, so yours can be longer if you want it to be, or it can be shorter. It just depends on what works for you. All right. So I just went ahead to mark the full length of my skirt. I'm going to rule out the from the center front where I folded. That is where I'm going to be taking my measurement. Now remember I said it's going to have a zipper. So I'm going to take my measurement from that point. I'm just measuring my waist circumference divided by 4, my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead and mark it down. All right. Now for the knee position, depending on how you want it to be, it can be free or it can be wide. All right. But what I'll do is you can either use your waist equivalent plus 1 to mark it, or you minus 6 from your the circumference of your hip, okay, and divide that by 4 to get your knee circumference. Okay, so I hope you got that right. So I'm just adding 1 inch down for stitching allowance. I will not be adding any extra allowance to this. I don't want to dart the skirt. Okay, but if you want to dart yours, go ahead and add allowances for your dart at the right places where it is needed. So I'm just going to make my connection like so.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite.
All right, so I've finished marking that. As you can see the curve at this end that indicates the hip area. All right, so we are going to take our zip allowance measurement. Okay, so at the waist end, I'm taking 1 inch for the zip allowance. Then at the hip point, I'll be taking 2 inch. Okay, that's for the butt sitting allowance. And then for the edge of this, I'll be taking 1 inch. Okay, so that by the time I fix my zipper, it will not be bulging at this end, and I'll have enough space for the butt allowance. All right, so that's the essence of adding extra inches at the hip point for that. All right, I hope you understand. So I'll just go ahead and make my connections together. Okay, you can see we have something similar like what we have on this other end, on the other part of it. All right. So finish everything. We're just going to go ahead to cut it out. Now, like I said, if you want to add that to yours, you can go ahead to add. Okay, I didn't want to add that to mine, and I think adding that to yours will give you a sort of fitting. Okay, but I didn't want to add that to mine, so I just went ahead to cut it out. So this is what we have after I finished doing that. You can see how this part looks like. Okay, so if you want yours to be longer, just go ahead and extend the length of the skirt. Okay, totally depends on what you want, how you want yours to be. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a notch for my zip allowance at this end. Okay, this is necessary so that while stitching this down there will be no mistakes whatsoever. Okay, so I've gone ahead to make a notch there so that I know where my zip is going to sit. Okay, so for the extension I have this fabric. Now depending on how wide you want yours to be, okay, the length depends on the length of your skirt. Okay, so that has to do with the length of your skirt, but the width of this depends on how wide you want yours to be. Okay, you can decide to make yours smaller or decide to make yours bigger. Right, so what I'm simply going to do for the length of my skirt, this will not be getting to the edge of the skirt. This is because I'll be folding the edge. Remember, I'm not using a lining to turn this over, and it's not be getting to the top of the skirt either. So I'm going to take off the measurement for the up, like the position for the up where it's not going to start from, that's about 1 inch, and then for the down where it's not going to start from, that's 1 inch. So I'm taking off 2 inches from this, sorry. Then I'm going to measure the full length of this. I hope you understand. So ensure you don't you remove at least 2 inches from yours. Okay, then you take the width of the width you desire. Okay, so for mine I just used 11 inches for mine. That's because I'll be using 1 inch to fold the edge of this, and I'll be using 1 inch to fold the edge of this. All right, so ensure you also add extra allowances to the side for hemming it, because you have to hem the sides of this, so ensure you add extra allowances to yours. Okay, so I've just went ahead to cut it out. Okay, so I have this folded into two for the two sides of this. What I'm going to do is to split this into two so that I have one for the right and the other for the left side of this.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight.
All right, so we've done that. Okay, so what I'll do is to, like I said, hem the edge of this, okay, by folding half of an inch first and then folding another half of an inch. Okay, so I'm using the allowance I added at this point to do this, and then I'll also hem this other end. Okay, you can see how this looks like. Okay, so I went ahead to hem one end of this and left the other part open. All right, so this is what we have at the end of the day. This is how they look like. Okay, so for the fringe, like I said earlier, depending on the length, yours can be longer. Okay, I didn't actually measure the length of mine. Sorry about that. So yours can be longer or it can be short, depending on the length of the fringe you're using, and depending on the desired outcome you want. Okay, so what I'll do is to place this on the longer part which I folded. Okay, you can see the length part where I folded. I'm going to place this down there. So I want mine to have a form of thickness, so I'll be folding this into three. Okay. Remember, I said I have about 4 yards of this. So you can decide to make yours like scanty because I noticed that they were pulling out at a point. So I wanted it to be fuller so that it will not pull out. So just I'm just going to fold this like so. You can see what I'm doing. Fold it like so. Okay, but I'll be doing these three and then I'll stitch it down. See, this is what it looks like. You can see how full mine looks like after the end of the day, and you can see the other end of this. Okay, so you have to stitch it down on the wrong part of your fabric. You can see. All right. So this is what we have after doing that. Okay, so we're going to go over to our skirt now. What I'll do is to leave allowance for my zip and then stitch down the down part. That's for the back part of my skirt. Okay, so I'm leaving about 7 inches for my zip position, and from that 7 inches, I'm going to stitch it down, then leaving about 5 inches for my slit. Okay, so depending on how much opening you want at the down. If you want your slits to be wider, go ahead and extend it. Everything depends on you, all right? So I'll just simply stitch it down and then close down this other end and leave the top and the bottom part open. All right, you can see. So I'll just go ahead and stitch down to this end right here and leave this part open. Okay, and leave this other end open. So I've done that. You can see how this looks like. Okay, you can go ahead and press it down. So I'll use my hemming gum to hem down the slit area of this so that it will give it a nice finish. This is what it looks like after I finish. You can see how that looks like, okay, after I've gone ahead to hem it down, right? Since I'll not be darting my skirt, okay, I'll go ahead and bring in the front piece right now. You can see this is the front piece. Remember, we added 1 inch of our allowance on both sides of our skirt. You can see how this looks like, okay? Now you can decide to stitch down the piece with the fringe firstly. Okay, just stitch it down first, or you can decide to stitch everything together at once. Now it totally depends on you and how achievable that would be. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mark the 1 inch allowance I took, the 1 inch allowance I added while I was cutting this out, because that would be my allowance. Okay, that's like the extra allowance. Now, because this fabric is quite stretchy, okay, I would advise, if you're not adding a dart to yours, I would advise you actually um take in more allowance, all right, so that it will give you that firm fitting around the body. Okay, so I tried this out with just using my 1 inch, and I noticed that at some point it wasn't giving me that firm fitting, or will I say snatch fitting. All right, so I'll advise you just take in more allowances. Okay, so instead of using 1 inch for joining this, you can decide to use 1.5 or 2 inches. That's because the fabric is stretchy, so that it can give you a firmer fit. All right, so I hope you understand what I'm trying to explain. Okay, so you can see the marks here. So what I'll do is to bring in my chalk. Okay, I was having issues with the chalk. They were really not showing as much as I wanted it to, so I had to use another color of chalk to make the marks on this other end. All right, so it's just simply repeating the same thing I have on the other side, marking my 1 inch allowance I added down to the end of this, and then connecting them in a straight line. All right, so I was trying to connect this in the straight line. I don't know if it was a fabric or the chalk, but they were really not cooperating together. So I was able to achieve this at the end of the day. You can see how this looks like. Okay, let's zoom this in so we have a better look. You can see how this looks like at the end of the day. All right, after I mark that down. So what I'll do after doing that, like I said, you can decide to stitch the fringe firstly alone before bringing in the back piece to attach to this. Okay, now remember we have the other part of the skirt, the other part of the fringe where we did not fold, or will I say the little piece of fabric which was not folded. Okay, so that will be the part that will be going towards um that will be the part that will be stitching on the fabric. Okay, so don't make the mistake of stitching the part with the fringe inside, because that it simply means it's not be showing. So I'm just marking um my 1 inch difference from the top part. Remember I said I going to leave 1 inch. The fringe, this the extension will not start from the top exactly. Okay, so I'm going to leave 1 inch at the top and 1 inch at the bottom. Okay, so I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So I'm just simply going to show you everything I'm just saying. Okay, so I'm just going to pin this down around here. You want to ensure that it is exactly on the line where you marked your allowance. Okay, so if you're using 1 inch of an allowance, ensure you're placing this on that 1 inch. If you're using 1.5, you're using two, whatever the case may be that you're using. Okay, so go ahead and pin that exactly on the line so that it stays firmly there, so that it will be easier also while you're stitching it down. All right, so I'll go ahead and repeat the same thing for this other side. Place it down. So I'm actually placing this front facing front. If you've noticed, I'm actually placing this on the front part of the fabric. Okay, it is not on the back part. This is on the front part of the fabric, because I'll be stitching this on the front part of the fabric. All right, so ensure you're placing this, no matter the kind of fabric you're using, ensure you take note of the front part of it or the back part of it. Okay, you want to know your front part of your fabric so that you're not mistaken while you're doing this. So just simply going to pin this down, ensuring I leave the allowances I need at the top and then at the bottom of this. Okay, so like I said, you can just stitch it down firstly, like stitch it down on both sides before bringing in the back piece. Okay, but for me, I wanted to stitch everything together, right? But I think stitching it one after the other, like it to make your work neater. All right, it's just a way for you to do this in the right way. Okay, so I'm going to place this down here like this. Okay, so this is the back part of our skirt. So now our skirt is placed front facing front with our extension inside of it. Okay, so I'm simply going to repeat the same process I have at the front part of this, marking my 1 inch all around this. This is because I'm stitching all of them together. This is so that while stitching this down, I will not have any form of
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my air.
both ends of this stitch from this part, and then repeat the same thing on this other end. So I've done that. You can see how this turned out. Okay, our skirt is coming in nicely and gradually. You can see this is what it looks like. Okay, after I finish doing that, you can see the extra allowances at the top and also at the bottom part of this. Okay, so go ahead and fix our band, and I've already gone ahead to cut out the band I'll be using for this. It measures about 4.5 inches in width. Okay, so what I'll do is to fold the band into two, okay, so that I can use this. So because this fabric is a little bit complicated, I was contemplating where the front or the back should be. Okay, so I'll just fold this into two this way, and then pick the open ends of my skirt and stitch it down with 1/2 inch all around this. All right, so I've done that. You can see how this looks like. Okay, so I'll be interlocking the other ends of this later on. So this is what it looks like after I've done that. So I'll go ahead and fix my zipper for the skirt. All right, and then go ahead and hem the edge of the skirt. So this is the final look of the skirt after fixing my zipper and hemming it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed watching this. Let me know in the comment section if you are trying out to make the skirt. Okay, thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.